Right, this video is bound to be a difficult one. I imagine the title is related to the Witcher 4 trailer, so if you're interested in hearing my response to some of the criticism I received on my trailer review, please check the timestamp I'm showing on the screen right now. But before I address that, I would like to take a moment and begin with another segment, one far more personal and far less interesting, to be honest. Okay, how do I get started with this? So, some of you, those who have been following my channel for a long time, might have noticed a bit of a change over the past couple of years, certainly in the frequency of my uploads, which has been going down steadily over time, and perhaps other negative aspects too. And I wanted to briefly explain why that has been the case. I kept postponing this video, hoping that I won't have to make it, but I think it has to be made. So, I've mentioned in the past that I have been dealing with certain health issues of my daughter, and this is still the case. Things have improved, but less than I would have preferred. And I'm not referring to the daughter I showed briefly in my last video. We do have another one who is 4 years old, and seemingly everything with her was fine until she was about a year and a half. Around that point, we started noticing that she struggles to walk properly and had trouble eating, especially solid food. By the time she became 2 years old, we had done a bunch of examinations, including CT scans and MRIs, and it turned out that she's not entirely well. There were actually some complications during her birth. To this day, I don't know many details since it was during the peak of the pandemic back in the day, and I couldn't really get close enough to get updates. Luckily, it all turned out well. Both my wife and daughter came home, seemingly in perfect health. However, it was not until 2 years later that we realized our daughter had sustained a kind of mild trauma to her white brain matter, likely as a result of being strangled by her umbilical cord for a prolonged period of time. The scientific term of that is quite the mouthful. Thankfully, as far as her movement is concerned, she's basically fully functional now and recovered. But even at 4 years of age, currently, she still cannot speak or eat properly, and there has been barely any improvement on these fronts. The suspicion is that there may be something out of order with the neuromuscular machinery that revolves around the mouth and the throat, that part of the body. So, long story short, raising her has been challenging for both my wife and I, not only time-consuming, but it has also taken a toll on our constitution. More so on mine, in fact, which I'm somewhat ashamed to admit, I guess, but it's true. I started feeling it within the first year after things got bad with the little one, and it hasn't been getting any better. I became withdrawn and kind of timid. I grew surprisingly anxious and concerned about things that I was used to dealing with in the past. Also, I very nearly stopped talking to people, unless I absolutely needed to. This doesn't include my wife or elder daughter, but outside of that, pretty much everyone else. People say I look like Gaunter or Dim, but I became a bit like the unseen elder, I suppose. The same goes for social media. I don't think I've read anything on Twitter or Instagram for a year or two. Honestly, I was never a huge user of these services, but I would at least check my DMs. Not anymore. I barely check my own Discord, for that matter. And of course, I loved reading my YouTube comments. I've been on YouTube for 12 years now, I think, and I used to read my comments every single day, without exception. I would even go over the comments that were flagged by YouTube and occasionally whitelist some of them, but for a long time, I haven't had much of a desire to read or respond to comments either. I do it once a week or so, and I go over them as quickly as I can and feel relieved when I'm finally done. And possibly worst of all, I started having trouble falling asleep. My mind would keep wondering over the things that troubled me throughout the day, on how they were unlikely to improve and, nonsense more or less, but I couldn't help it. and despite sleeping less than usual on a regular basis, it would still take me sometimes about 2 hours to fall asleep. What's worse, when I eventually fell asleep, I would then often have bad dreams about the same kind of stuff that kept me awake in the first place. Eventually, it got to the point where I began to resent the very notion of sleeping. As silly as it might sound, evening would come and I would think to myself, oh my god, I've got to go to bed now. And as a result, my days became a little worse too. So I carried on in this state for about another year, I would say. It was almost surreal, hard for me to believe. I am 35 now, and I've never really been like this before. So I kept hoping that I could handle it, kept telling myself that I need to, man up, pull myself together, discipline my mind, or whatever the expression is. But despite my best efforts, I was not getting anywhere. Again, when it came to my responsibilities and interactions with my family, I was close to how I was before, but generally I had changed for the worse. So ultimately, I decided to go to a doctor. I went to a psychiatrist, and after some evaluation, I was diagnosed with depression. Unipolar would be the technical term in English, and I actually started taking a bunch of medications, relatively mild ones, I'm told, and this was about a month ago. And I've only now gotten to the regular dosage. I've been slowly working up to it, as instructed by the doctor, of course. Some side effects took hold almost immediately though, like this weird dryness of mouth, which was the reason why my audio quality was all over the place in that massive video I made about the original story of The Witcher 3. Otherwise, the positive effects of the treatment have been slow, but I guess it has just now begun properly. I recall when making my trailer critique, my last video, at one point I brought up Dragon Age Origins, and while I was doing my initial take, I accidentally said Dragon Age Oranges, and I started laughing, and I remember thinking to myself, damn, it's been a while since I had a good laugh. So perhaps it is starting to work. Now, how does all of this translate to my YouTube channel? Well, my motivation for making videos has been worse, and you could say that over the past couple of years my channel has partially died. It's not immediately apparent by looking solely at recent videos, because whenever I upload, within the first week or so, my videos still get an okay amount of views, but the total amount of views that my videos receive on a daily basis has dropped to about a quarter of what it used to be. Part of it is because I haven't been nearly as active. Another part likely has to do with the way YouTube works nowadays. My videos simply don't get recommended as much. Even I have trouble finding them sometimes when Googling or searching on YouTube. And I get comments too about how people haven't been seeing my videos in their feeds for a long time. Additionally, and that's probably even worse, I feel like my videos are just not as good anymore. I have been getting these kinds of comments more regularly as well, on my last video especially, and I suppose they might be onto something. In hindsight, I was unnecessarily negative, perhaps a little shallow, and I may not have addressed certain things the best way possible. The truth is, actually, that I have never considered myself a massive Witcher expert, at least in terms of general Witcher lore. I mean, I do love The Witcher 3, I've played it a million times, but I haven't played the previous games nearly as much, and I've read the books once. However, for one reason or another, there are those of you who look up to me and my opinions on these matters, and with that in mind, I probably should have done a better job. In fact, and I have been considering this more and more of late, I think my time on YouTube is at an end. I mean, I've had low points in the past. As I said, I've been here for an absurd amount of time, but I've always had a more positive outlook, always felt like something will, turn up, as Wilkins Macoba says. That's an awesome character from David Copperfield. But yeah, I'm not sure if I have it in me anymore. I had a look at the videos I made over the past year, and my most viewed video is the April Fool's prank. So perhaps the joke is on me after all. I will definitely finish the series about the story changes during the development of The Witcher 3. That 3-hour-long video was part 1. There are going to be at least 2 more. And a lot of people have been telling me to play Baldur's Gate 3 and the upcoming, what was its name? Kingdom Come Deliverance game. I haven't played the first installment, I know it's good, and I will likely try the second. The point is, while I could drop out of Twitter and the likes without a second thought, I can't do this with YouTube, phase out of it without saying a word, and I guess that's why I'm making this video, to tell you what's been going on, get it off my chest, and rest easy that I won't have to address it again, hopefully, and that if I end up leaving YouTube more permanently, I will have at least given you the general reasoning. Okay, I'd like to close this section by saying that at the end of the day, things with me aren't that bad. Rosa, that's the little one's name, she's doing fine actually. I mean, she's cheerful and active and she's growing up despite the eating issues. She's not in pain or misery. And my life is not really bad by any serious measure. So let us be done with this dreary segment and distract ourselves with some good old Witcher 3 talk. Well, Witcher 4, I guess, but with lots of Witcher 3 references, because I have to end this video on a less awkward note, and what a better way to do it than address some viewer comments about my own criticisms of The Witcher 4's trailer. If you haven't seen that video, you can have a look at it first. So there were a bunch of polarizing comments, first of all, but more so than usual, there were people who generally disliked my take. And while I was being honest, I'd like to address a couple of things. First off, about the Ciri becomes a Witcher ending being canon. That's what I claimed, and lots of people corrected me, suggesting that the developers have said that all the endings are canon and they will all be honored in the actual game. I was accused of not doing proper research as well, for which I apologize, I truly did not know. The video was based entirely on the trailer and the IGN interviews that came with the trailer, and I can't recall the devs talking about the canon endings in those interviews. So either I missed it, which is possible, or it was posted on a piece of social media that I do not follow. More on that in the first segment of the video, I guess. But one way or another, I do still stand by what I said. I believe I mentioned how the endings could be twisted, is the word I used, to have all of them converge into the ending where Ciri becomes a Witcher. I imagine that's how CDPR is handling the situation, and while I'm not omniscient, I don't know exactly how they will pull it off. It might end up being great, but generally, I don't like the idea. I want my Ciri, who got so upset by me selling her that she left her whole life behind, to stay gone, you know? It's such a major decision, and so I don't want to see her back. And I want my Empress Ciri to actually be an Empress and make some lasting changes, like she planned on doing, instead of changing her mind and mucking about through forgotten villages, like she said she wouldn't.
I realised that if I wish to change anything, I cannot do so hunting monsters round forgotten villages. I must do so from there, from Nilfgaard.
Also, what about her future husband? And of course, I wanted my Witcher Ciri to be a Witcher, but it seems I'm getting all of my Ciris to be Witchers eventually, so I complain about it. Now, the next thing I'd like to discuss is a certain theory that I once again was not aware of. Some of you were surprised that I did not bring it up, and I also get the impression that it might have been confirmed or nearly confirmed by CDPR as well. So the theory explains why Ciri underwent the mutations, and potentially what happened to her Elder Blood powers. As far as I understand, it goes like this. Ciri, regardless of what path she chose in the third game, decided to mutate herself willingly in order to remove the Elder Blood powers because she saw them as a curse, basically. Some people have suggested that Ciri fears Ithlinne's prophecy and the fact that she or her children might bring about the end of the world. And even more people have claimed that Ciri resents this constant pressure of being hunted and being used for someone else's gain, and ultimately being unable to live the life that she wants, feeling like a prisoner within her own body, and by extension being unwilling to transfer such a burden to her children. And so her solution is to rid herself of the Elder Blood. Now, that is an interesting theory, one that I honestly did not think of, and it may be what the developers are really going for. But since I complain about everything, let me share some reservations I have about it. First, let's take a look at Ithlinne's prophecy. I think the games only ever share the most popular verse of it, the one about the world perishing in ice and being reborn of the Elder Blood bursting into flames, and that the first sign of this world-ending chain of events will be the spilling of the blood of the Enshe. There are, however, a few more verses throughout the books. One of them sort of mentions Nilfgaard's conflict with the Northern Kingdoms, but the general idea is that eventually there will be this world-ending event, this icy winter of destruction, and that the Elder Blood will bring about the following spring and rebirth. Consequently, the bearer, or the child of the Elder Blood, is referred to as the Swallow. Now, on the point of Ciri or her children bringing about the end of the world, I think that such a conclusion is a rather bleak interpretation of the words. There is certainly a relation between the Elder Blood and the world-ending cataclysm, but we could also say that Ciri or her children are actually destined to save the world. And from that perspective, Ciri actually has a reason to hold on to it as hard as she can.
I have seen worlds bound in ice. I know what awaits you. Only the Elder Blood can stop the White Frost. Only I can stop it.
Ithlinne's prophecy is drivel. Destruction is not our fate.
Entropy cannot be stopped. The worlds will freeze one after the other, and all life will perish.
Avalok is right. If I do nothing, humans, elves, all will face destruction.
There's gotta be another way.
What can you know about saving the world, silly? You're but a witcher.
The other part of the theory about Ciri's feelings and her desire to be rid of this power, which brings nothing but trouble and takes away her freedom, I actually like it quite a bit, because it's basically true. Now, I would say that if CDPR planned on working this angle, they probably should have done it after the Battle of Kaer Morhen. That was a massive low point for Ciri, precisely from that perspective. Her power was not only causing her to be hunted and tracked at every step she took, but it actually led to the death of Vesemir, and quite nearly killed Geralt and Yennefer as well. So it was an absolutely massive hit for Ciri. Not to mention that we had just performed a kind of mini trial of the grasses on Uma, so if ever there was a moment for Ciri to say, screw this, I can't take it anymore, I'm going through the trial to remove my power or die in the attempt, I think that was the moment. But what happened was she threw some snowballs, or in my case, got a little drunk, and instead decided to pull herself together, quit running, quit hiding, face her nightmares, face her enemies. She actually mastered her power. She became this teleporting superhero, defeated the Wild Hunt with some help, and the way I see it, fulfilled her destiny by saving the multiverse, or whatever she did when she stopped the White Frost. So after all this, is it possible that she still fears the forces that wish to use her? Who else is left to challenge her? I mean, I suppose there can always be a new, big villain from another world, or perhaps she wants to have a simple life for a change, maybe settle down with Morvan. have a few kids without the fear of passing her elder blood and putting them in danger. So there are of course reasons for her to desire this still. There is also an implication in the books that Ciri's children might be even more powerful than she is, similar to how she is more powerful than her mother, but to me it seems like she would have tried to handle it some other way. Besides, becoming a witcher makes you sterile, so it won't really be of much help if she truly wished to have children. Another important thing to add is that I am under the strong impression that the ending of the third game was precisely CDPR's interpretation of Ithlinne's prophecy coming true. In fact, I would go a step further. I would say the whole of the third game was CDPR's interpretation of Ithlinne's prophecy. Here are several big clues. First, most of the main plot is centered around following in Ciri's footsteps, which matches the part of the prophecy about following the swallow. Then, the conflict between the South and the North is at its peak precisely around the ending of the game. Speaking of the ending, the final quest in the game is called Ted Dariad, which is also the name of the final age, the final stage, basically, before the end of the world. Not to mention that originally, the game's title was supposed to be The Witcher 3: A Time of Sword and Axe, which is how the prophecy begins. More about that in my 3-hour-long video. Oh, and of course, originally, Ciri literally had to die in order to stop the White Frost, which matches the part where the Elder Blood bursts into flames upon bringing the promised rebirth.
Thanks.
There's also the White Light. So, to me, it's quite clear that in the making of The Witcher 3, and especially the endings, CDPR meant to wrap up and fulfill Ithlinne's prophecy, at least the way they see it, and just like Geralt's story, I think they should probably leave it alone where they left it and let it rest. So ultimately, if this theory is really what the developers are going for, it can work and it can be good, and I think it's far more likely for me to enjoy it over the changes to the endings. The Elder Blood and Ithlinne's prophecy are ambiguous enough to where CDPR can come up with all kinds of twists and explanations. If we were to follow the words very strictly, for example, it technically implies that the Elder Blood is the key to reach a place, open a gate to somewhere where we can be safe. So they may even decide that Ciri did not really defeat the White Frost, and maybe she'll have to reclaim her power to fulfill the prophecy which did not quite get fulfilled. Who knows? Finally, I would like to briefly revisit the "Can women be witchers" part. Now, that was one segment I definitely expected backlash for, and to be honest, I may have gotten less than I expected, probably because it was towards the end of the video and people who disliked it had already left, but I think it was a little misunderstood or misinterpreted, so I'd like to clarify a couple of things. I think some people got the impression that I was suggesting that men cannot properly relate or roleplay as female characters like Ciri, for example, or that women can't relate to male characters such as Geralt. I did not mean to suggest that. In fact, I mentioned how much I enjoyed playing as Queen Maeve. So the thing is, while making the video, I heard concerns, mostly on my Discord, that Ciri might turn out to be a sort of female Geralt, for lack of a better word. It is initially based on the visual similarities in their looks and fighting style, and I thought to myself that it would not quite work to have the same character except with the opposite gender. Some people understood me properly and disagreed still, which is fine, and I do stand by my opinion, even if it's a little questionable or disagreeable, that gender plays a part in a character's personality. Maybe not in D&D, but in general, I think it does. Now, the extent to which it plays a role varies. It depends on the type of character, as well as the time and place, and the kind of society or world they inhabit. If you compare Geralt or Jane Eyre, as I said, to, for example, V from Cyberpunk, then I would say that gender matters less in V's case and more so in Geralt and Jane's. In a setting like Cyberpunk 2077, chemical and cybernetic enhancements can pretty much nullify any physical, hormonal, or neurological differences. However, I do believe that as long as there are at least some fundamental differences between us, these differences will manifest themselves in who we are and what we do. The manifestations may be small and subtle, but they will be there. And with that, I believe I'm done. I wonder if I'll reconsider and just delete the first half of this video. I suspect I'll leave it in. I don't know when exactly this will go public, but I will take the opportunity to wish you all a happy new year. May it bring joy and fulfillment and some world peace, I guess. We could definitely use a bit of that. And yeah, tell me what you thought, mostly about the second half. And of course, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned and be good.